So what is coastal engineering about? Well, the main problem we are talking about is coastal erosion. I mean, that is a very fundamental problem, and we see it a lot. Here's an example from Hoi An in Vietnam, in the center coast. Here another example from the coast of Ghana, near the Volta Delta. This road was very much threatened, and the low-lying land behind it as well. Here's what happens if you block the longshore sediment transport and don't replenish the beach. This used to be a very wealthy recreational area. You see this blue thing here is a former swimming pool, and that is clearly not in a very good state now. We're not just concerned with sandy coasts, but we also look more and more into muddy coasts and mangrove coasts. Well, here's what happens if you take away the mangrove belt and develop fish ponds everywhere. This is the coast of Semarang in 2002. This is in 2008. And this is in 2030. So you see these, if you take away the natural defenses that keep the sediment in place and protects against waves, then you can have erosion of kilometers. You see, on the other hand, that in this area there's already a new mangrove belt growing naturally. And of course, efforts are underway now to see if this area can be restored. Now, what causes these kind of problems? One of the major things that happens is that sand and gravel used for construction is taken away from the beaches at an astonishing rate. And the amount is similar to the total sediment discharge of all rivers worldwide. And at the same time, the total sediment discharge of all rivers is reduced, as you see, for instance, in this example of the Yangtze River. Worldwide, in tropical areas, there is a huge loss of mangrove belts. And here's an example from the Kamau Peninsula in the south of your country. Tens of meters per year of erosion here and there. This scale runs from -25 to 25 meters per year. That is huge. And to illustrate this, you see this mangrove area and the ships lying there, and this whole area used to be land some decades ago. This is from the Futan region. Other causes are that if the sea level is rising or the bottom is subsiding, then that creates an accommodation space, with a difficult word. And that means that for instance, sand flats and mud flats tend to follow the level of the sea. And if the sea level rises, then that creates an extra space that has to be filled up with sediment, and that usually comes from the coast. And degradation of mangrove and coral coves leads to sediment losses, especially the fine sediment that is captured by mangroves is totally helpless if the protective systems are not there anymore. And then on top of that, we concentrate the big rivers in such a way that they don't disperse their sediment naturally anymore, but they blow all the sand and the mud to deeper water. So it is not feeding the nearshore deltas anymore. And then finally, what happens a lot around the world is that, especially where ports are built, we block the longshore sediment transport. And then on one side, you see that there's an enormous accumulation of sand, and on the other side, there's a big erosion. This is the area where I just showed the swimming pool falling into the water. Then, to make things worse, a lot of delta areas are experiencing a huge subsidence. Here's examples from Jakarta, 4 meters in 30 years' time. Louisiana, also meters. The Mekong Delta, that scale is here in centimeters per year, and you see here around Ho Chi Minh City, it's more than 4 centimeters per year. You have to realize that is 4 meters per century. So this trumps sea level rise. The main cause is groundwater extraction, but this has a devastating effect also on the shoreline erosion, and especially on the frequency of flooding. It could be stopped if you stop the groundwater extraction. The example, the famous historical example, is Venice, which stopped subsiding after the groundwater extraction was stopped. So the main lesson from this is that we don't need climate change to mess up our coasts. But it helps. It will be worse if we don't do many things. Because we have to deal with these scenarios of climate change, which currently run, let's say, somewhere between 30 centimeters and a meter by 2100. But if the recent stories about, like for instance, the effect of Antarctic ice breaking or sliding into the sea, if those become true, then we have to maybe face 2 meters of sea level rise by 2100. And that obviously for areas like the Mekong Delta or the Central Coast would be devastating. Just a few words on maintaining the coastline. We have experienced a lot of good experiences with soft options, with nourishments, both near shore and on the beach. And the good thing is that this directly addresses the sediment deficit. And after disturbance, during the nourishment project, the beach is returned to a natural state. It needs to be repeated regularly. But the latest trend is mega nourishments. And if you dump really big amounts of sediment in one go, then the price per cubic meter drops dramatically. Here are some examples. This is what the coast near The Hague looks like. It's extremely nice. You see this dune ridge here has actually grown naturally. Now compare this with the situation in Hoi An that I showed you in the beginning, where the coast is totally starved of sediment. And you can try to stop it with hard structures, but it does not work. So adding a lot of sand to the system is quite possible nowadays, and this is something we promote. And this is an example of this sand, an innovative mega nourishment, the sand engine that was built in 2011. And you see how this has this very interesting shape that deforms, and this sand in the end is going to feed all of this coast for the next 20 years.